Soulless Dead Brotherhood, Chapter 19, The Revolution. A few days had passed, and a bunch of clashes had happened in the town, fistfights mostly. People were scared, and people were really worried. As I got up that morning, I was met with a knock at the door. I was barely dressed, and I answered. It was Jake, Logan, and Dawson. I put my clothes on, and we went around to the backyard of my house, which we never did. Dawson checked around, clearing the area, and said there was no adults around. What did you want to tell us, Jake? Logan and I sat down, and we all sat around the small fire I'd set. Shit is going down, guys, Jake leaned in. Jesse's family, Sam, and the whole shebang, everybody, left. A bunch of people. Last night, I think. They forced their way out. They knocked out 2 guards. It was all set up. Everything went perfectly. You're joking me, Dawson said. Hold on. Jesse's family left? Some of them are older. Why would they leave? Guys, some serious stuff is going on, and I think the leadership has been caught in their lies. This is a bad sign. Now, I thought to myself that a few people had gotten fistfights in the recent few days, but it couldn't be this bad. But I knew Sam said he was going to be leaving. I spoke up and explained what Sam had said to me. It's the perfect plan, Jake said. What do you mean the perfect plan? The leadership. I mean, look at it this way. Resources have been limited. I mean, that big war was about resources and about protecting our own. Jesse was placed there so that he could be the devil, so to speak. Like a lamb to slaughter. They knew he did what he did, and they knew that he could get the job done. But when the pressure got to him, they just threw him aside. No due process whatsoever. You're joking me, Logan said. There's no way. They wouldn't do that. I've known some of these people all my life. The leadership wouldn't allow that. We all know Jesse didn't do anything wrong, but they certainly didn't give him any chance to do better. We weren't there when he killed all those people and all those things. All the things that happened to him happened for a reason. The leadership wouldn't go out there, and we all know that. Tom was one of the people that was in the leadership, but he resigned. And he left, and he was one of the few people that actually had a moral compass in this world. Now, I didn't know Mr. Hill on a first-name basis like they did, but I did know that he was a really good guy. He was genuine, and he was sweet even in this world where all this stuff was happening. I knew they wouldn't leave for any unreasonable reason. What do you think they left for? Where are they going to go? I don't know, Jake said. My dad and I were talking last night as he was doing rounds around the wall, and he said that a new leadership has already been picked out. And Dan, your parents know. Well, at least your dad does. Has he told you? This is news to me. Oh my God, he said. Look, the town has been running out of resources. Hang on a second, Dawson said. I've been bringing in food every week. Several squirrels, possums. I mean, it's not great meat, but it's food. How could it go bad? Well, here's the thing. I found out some of the food went bad due to poor preparation. They didn't preserve it right. So some food got bad and some animals had gotten into others. They even say that some thugs broke in at one point. You're joking me. You're messing with us, Jake. Logan kept saying. I'm not. Dr. Patel! I mean, look at Danny's hand. He was right there when Dr. Patel was shot. Not but a few people away. I looked at my hand and I could see a little bit of blood coming from the cut. My hand was wrapped up in a nice linen bandage. I held it close to me. Yeah, I said. Patel pointed all that stuff out and he got killed. Jesse knew that there was corruption. There had to have been. Or else he would have had at least a trial in front of everybody to explain himself. Maybe they saw him as an initial threat. Maybe all this stuff wasn't found out by him necessarily, but it was going to be found out eventually, and he was one of the few people to act so rashly as to get answers. That whole war was his brainchild. He marched out of town with all those resources and took back some, and even saved people's lives, so he would have been seen as a hero, even though he did all that crazy stuff. And I think the leadership knew that. It only makes sense. Last night, the first bunch of people were taken to the school. Small buses. A few people are saying that they were taken by gunpoint. Mostly elderly people. Gunpoint, Dawson said. Why would elderly people be held at gunpoint? Sure, a lot of people are armed here, but why would they be needed to be herd in there? To make sure that they know, Jake announced, that everybody here is under them. That they should be afraid. That we should be afraid. I spoke up. To be honest, I'm pretty afraid right now. Don't be, Logan said. And besides, they didn't kill Jesse. That's why I don't believe any of this. It's all there. No, it isn't, Logan said. Danny killed Jesse. There's no way for... No. He ran away before they could do anything about it, Jake protested. And what happened with Danny and Jesse was an accident. It was a fluke. Jesse never even got to meet him. And the same for Dan. Danny shot because he was afraid. That doesn't make it right, okay? Logan stood up, pointing at me. He shot our friend. Are we just going to let that go? Of course we're going to let that go, Dawson said. He had no idea. Logan grabbed all his stuff and walked out. Dawson looked at us. I'm going to go make sure he's okay. Alright? And Jake, for the record, I believe you. He placed his hand on his shoulder. Alright, well, I'll be right back. He scampered off looking for him. Jake continued to look at the ground, with a contemplative look on his face. Some serious shit's gonna go down tonight, Jess. Some of the men, they're not at their posts. Are you serious? A couple busloads have happened. Taking about 30 people at a time. Guns. They're wanting total control. Some New World Order style stuff. Don't worry about it, Jake. It's gonna be okay. I walked back home and Jake ran off. I didn't know where he went. His radio started acting weird and he said he had to take a call, and walked off with it in his hands. I sat down in my room and then I went to the kitchen, confronted my mother, asking her if she knew where Dad was. At the clinic, I would assume. I sat down and began to spill my guts about what was happening. She pulled out a map from the city's special unit that she ran. It was more or less making sure that everybody was doing their job kind of thing. This is the school and this is where all the layout is going to be. Why would they attack? I explained to her that everybody was being loaded onto buses and held at gunpoint, like we were cattle. Oh my God, she said. I explained to her what Jake said about all the men gathering up and all the women that were able to fight going down towards the school to fight. She began to spill her guts about how the school was being fortified and how there were gunmen on the roofs. I looked at the map and I saw a large field full of corn and tall grass, and I said, maybe that's where we're gonna go. That's where they're gonna hide. Mom, we gotta go help them. I'm not letting you go, she said. You're gonna stay here and I'm gonna go confront them and stop this. Mom, they have guns. If they're loading people into buses, who's gonna stop them? They'll listen to reason. Mom, there is no reason. I grabbed her by the shoulders. We've gotta go there and we gotta stop this. Look, I didn't tell you, but Logan made us shotguns. He's a blacksmith. I know who Logan is, and why do you have a gun? I went to my room and fished out a small, broken-down shotgun made of a few pipes and a wooden stock. Everything is homemade. Look, paper shells and everything. He made this for us in the event we had to survive. This is a survival scenario, Mom. I slapped the shotgun together and loaded a paper shell in it. I cocked the single-shot ordinary shotgun and got ready to sling it over my shoulder as my mom grabbed it. You're not going there, and you're certainly not going by yourself. Mom, we gotta stop this. We gotta do something. We gotta save those people. I looked out the window and I could see a bus driving by down the street towards the school. We gotta find Dad. My mother walked over to the fridge and pushed it aside. There was a small Glock taped to the back of it. Back when I was doing law, people wanted me dead, so we would have to go to the target range and practice. I hope to never use this, but we've got to save your father. What's the plan, son? As soon as we were done talking and getting our plan done, we walked outside of the town and walked towards the tall cornfield. It was quite a trek, so we had a ways to go. We kept walking for several minutes, and as we were walking, I explained to her that I would take point, that Dad should be somewhere in the cornfield posted up so they could take out the snipers and assault, as it had the most cover. And they were probably going to attack at night. It was midday, but the sun was still far from setting, and we were still a far ways off from our school. Keep a lookout, my mom said. There could be dead out here. I shouldered the shotgun on the string holster that had been made for me, and I pulled out my long knife. Surely enough, a few seconds later, a few of the dead popped out. It being as cold as it was, they were moving slow. They pushed the tall brush out of the way, and it crackled under the icy texture that was placed over it the night before. They began to move towards us. One stretched his arm out, and I grabbed him by the open arm wrist and pulled him to the ground. It tripped and fell. I placed my knee on its shoulder blade and still held its arm down. Its mouth was flailing, trying to bite at my other leg. I put the knife and it sunk through its head, collapsing the skull, crunching into the hard, cold dirt. The other dad began to walk towards my back. My mother raised her gun and I told her to put it down. The dad lunged at me and I grabbed it by the arm stretched out, putting my hand on its stomach, flipping it over me. I learned that during school. The judo flip was so effective that the undead hit the ground and I could hear its legs break. The creature fled at me and I pinned its arms down and stuck the knife in its head. I took a deep breath and said, "We gotta keep moving. Go, go, go!" We scampered across the field and eventually we got to about the midway point. I stood up on a small berm and I could see the school. I immediately poked my head back down and said we had to crawl. We went a little bit to the right and decided to stick closer to the road. That way, if anything bad happened, we could just escape through the other fields or just back down the road. My mother thought that was a good idea. As the sun began to set, we could see the truckfuls and the bus loads of people being sent to what I would call concentration camp. On the way, I quietly explained what they were planning on doing, and my mother became more and more shocked. It began to all make sense to her, as she explained. The sun was beginning to set, and we initially heard the first shots. I fished out a small monocular that I had, and I looked up. I looked over at the school, which was now in our view. I could see one of the snipers hanging off the side of the roof, just barely, and blood pouring down the side of the road. Another man was taken out, and then gunfire began to open up. I popped my head up as high as I could and looked over, and I could kind of tell where the shots were coming from. "Is that where your dad is?" my mother yelled. "I don't know. I'm not sure. We definitely don't want to go over there. We're going to be in the line of fire." As sure as I looked behind me, I could hear the bus coming up. The bus stopped in the middle of the road, and the people were all crowded outside of the bus. Two men came out. One had an AR-15 and the other had a handgun, pointing at the people to get into the ditch. The bus driver was told to stay in his seat. The man with the handgun stayed just inside the door so that the bus driver wouldn't take off. They could hear the snaps and the cracks from the guns going off. "What the hell is going on?" one of the guards yelled with the AR. My mother and I crept closer. We stayed well behind the bush, but we could see all of them. The people were being pushed into the ditch on the other side of the road. The guard walked over towards where we could see him plainly, his rifle brandished. He pulled out a pair of binoculars and looked over. "Hey, the school's getting shot up. There's something going on. Are we being raided? There's no way in hell. We're behind a wall at this point. It would take them forever to get here, and they're shooting from the field." "Oh, you gotta be kidding me," he screamed out. "Is this some kind of coup?" He walked behind the bus and told people to get off. Hurry up. pointing the gun and firing into the air a few times. The people were frightened. Women, children, a few injured men, and a couple of elderly people with their hands on their heads, and they were poorly dressed. The cold was biting, and I could see my own breath. Some of them were shivering, and they were laying down in the ditch. "We gotta do something. These people have seen too much. We don't want them worrying about the same thing. Don't worry, the guys at the school will handle it." "What the hell are we gonna do?" The bus driver was protesting. The man with the handgun pistol whipped him, knocking him out. I looked over at my mother and said, "Go over there just a little bit. I'm going to draw the guy with the rifle out. As soon as you see him walk towards me and raise his gun, I want you to take him out, okay?" "Son, I can't let you do that." "Mom, we gotta help these people." She crawled a few paces away and set up. She hid behind a large rock that was in the middle of the field. I grabbed a small, medium-sized rock and picked it up and lugged it into the middle of the road. As it hit, it made a large noise. He came from behind the bus towards where we could see him on the left side. He raised his rifle and said, "Come out of there now!" He fired once in the air. I began to move towards the man. "All right, that's it. Come on, let's go." As he began to beckon me out, my mother raised up, fired several times. A few of the rounds had missed, but some of them hit him. One in the knee, one in the stomach, one in the shoulder, and one in the throat. The man dropped to the ground, dropping his rifle. I crept down and I could look. Just below the bus, people were screaming. I could see their faces, just beyond, as we were at the same level. I could see the man with the handgun frantically running back and forth, peeking out. My mother began to fire towards the front of the bus where he was at. The man who was shot was still bleeding on the ground. Blood was spurting from his neck. He was gurgling and gasping for air as he couldn't breathe. His one good leg was squirming in his other arms that were wrapped around his neck, trying to hold the blood in. I walked towards him and his eyes got big. I noticed the guy. He was one of the wall guards on the day of the shooting. I got really close to him, pulled out my knife, and stuck it in his head as I put my knee on his wound. His good leg jerked really hard, and he went quiet. The gurgling stopped. Blood was all over my pant leg, and the warm blood immediately got cold from the crisp air. My mother continued to fire around once in a while, but I could tell she was starting to run out. At this point, the man with the handgun was posted up by the front right wheel. He kept shouting back and telling them to shut the hell up, telling the passengers to be quiet. He kept peeking out once in a while to see where my mom was at, and he fired one or two shots. I crept up quietly behind him with the shotgun that Logan had made for us. I cocked the hammer back. I ran up really fast to him, putting my foot right in the middle of his back. He lurched forward and fell to the ground face first, and his gun slid away from him. I put the gun barrel to the back of his head simultaneously and pulled the trigger. As I did, his face reared back, and it tore a part of his face off. A large plume of smoke boomed from the front of the rifle, and it kicked really hard, almost fell out of my arms. I took a few steps back, and blood was all over my feet and all over my pants. When the smoke cleared, I could see his face mutilated. Some of the pellets weren't moving as fast, and so they got dug into his skull, while others ripped whole chunks out of his face. Blood poured down the side of the cold street, and I helped the people up and got them back onto the bus. My mother slowly made it out of the brush. At this point, I'd gathered up the two firearms and handed the other pistol to my mother, and I grabbed the rifle and shouldered it. My mother had been grazed on the arm and asked her if she was okay. All the while, all the shots and all the firing had continued to rage on at the field in the school. We could hear it on the horizon. "Mom, are you okay?" I immediately grabbed a bandage and began to close up the wound as she was grazed. "I'm gonna be okay. You did good, son." She took off a small part of her jacket, placed it over the dead guy. "We should probably cover these two. She took the rest of the jacket that she had not torn up and placed it on the other dead man. Another man posted up and asked us if he could have the rifle. He was an elderly man, but he was a non-veteran, so he was pretty familiar with the AR. We woke the bus driver up and handed him a handgun, and he holstered it just inside his jacket to hide it. Now they're going to ask where the guards are. I've done this twice today. And you allowed it? My mother asked. Mom, leave him alone. They held us all at gunpoint and made me do all this. The veteran said, we got to make a plan. Most of the guys are going to be in the area trying to protect where the shooting is going on. So there's probably going to only be 1 or 2 guards in the back. That's more than enough firepower to scare us. But if we're armed, we can easily take out 2 guys. That's the plan, I said. They won't be guarding the back. They'll be more worried about where the combat's going on. So let's go. The old man put the rifle down on the floor, where he could easily grab it, and my mother and I lay down on the aisle of the bus floor. Posting up, I reloaded my small rudimentary shotgun, taking out the burnt-up copper shell and replacing it with a new one. My mother had a few rounds left. She fished them out of a small purse she carried with her and loaded them into the magazine. I've only got about 2 shots left, my mom said. The bus was driving and we were going really fast. As soon as we took the turn into the school, the back wheels skidded a little bit and people were screaming, afraid. A round bounced actually through the window and almost hit somebody. We gotta get in there. As we began to go around the back of the school, we could see 2 men motioning us to come closer and get inside. They raised their rifles and ran on screaming onto the bus. Now get everybody! Get your asses off the bus now! One of the men stood just outside, and the other man stood on the middle of the aisle. He noticed us immediately, and he raised his handgun. The bus driver grabbed his arm, and the round went into the floor, missing everybody. They wrestled each other, but a round went off, hitting the bus driver in the leg. He wailed out in pain, and I raised my shotgun and fired. As I shot, a large plume came out of smoke, and my mother fired a few other rounds. The lead pellets bounced around all over the front area of the bus. Everything was confusing, and it was quiet. The bus driver was crept down just below the steering wheel. We went up, and the man was dead. Another man was posted just outside the window. He started firing in through the glass. Everybody ducked down. The non-veteran rose up with his rifle and capped him in the head twice. He immediately fell to the ground. We've all filed out of the bus, and we told the people to wait just behind the trash cans, just behind where they would load lunch and food. The veteran told us he only had about 25 rounds left in the magazine. We took the handgun from the bus driver. His leg was injured, and I bandaged him up as best as I could. We gotta help the other people inside, the old man stated. My mom looked at me. I'll stay with these people. I gave her the handgun. I said, Mom, I'm going to go in there. Make sure Dad's not in there. And I'm going to make sure that the people we care about are going to be okay. I can do this, Mom. I know, my mother said. Just be safe, okay? Okay, I said. Me and the veteran posted up on the door, and he peeked inside. There's nobody in there. The hallways are a ghost town. If we go in there, we gotta get this done. This revolution's already started. We're gonna finish it, damn it. You knew about it? I yelled at him. Of course I did. But I didn't have a gun at that time. Now the playing field's even. Now let's get in there and take care of these bastards. He pushed the door in and I filed up behind him. My shotgun and several shells ready in my hand. We proceeded down the hallway and we could hear men yelling, shouting, and people screaming in the doors. They were locked up with chains. We couldn't help them, but we knew we could cycle back around and help them later. We could hear boots stomping against the ground as people began to run, asking for ammo. Some confusion, some of the guards were running around. They're distracted. Alright, kid. Want to go in. 3, 2, 1.